This is WPSL Port St. Lucie.
From the beginning of time, humans have tried to heal themselves with ritual and prayer, and with whatever nature provided. Through thousands of years of trial and error, formal systems of healthcare developed, systems based on foods, herbs, and other natural remedies. These systems live side by side with what we call Western medicine. Western medicine has been an enormous benefit in helping to conquer devastating infections and perfecting surgical procedures. But there is more to medicine than doctors and hospitals, and that's exactly what we'll explore this week on A Better Way to Health. Hello, I'm Stuart Shipe, a registered pharmacist, acupuncture physician, and Chinese herbalist. I'm your host this week. We make no effort to recommend or to judge, only offer that you explore a theory that good medicine comes in many forms. So let's get started. Phone lines are open for you this morning for questions, comments, or experiences about your health on WPSL at 340-1590. That's 340-1590. Let's hear from you.
All right, folks, another show is on the way. Give us a call. Like it says, 340-1590. Cliff is in the studios this morning with me, and he does a great job at getting those questions on the air. Or if you just want to let him know, he can actually pass the question himself to me, and I'll be happy to help you out with that. The goal is trying to find the information that you need. Obviously, it's a health show. Find the information that you need. Get the data really lined up so that you can make an educated decision about your health and what you want for your health. Those that usually tune into my show every single week are definitely in the natural medicine world. They either one, they want natural medicine for themselves. Number two, they're tired of taking medications that just seem like they're treating symptoms and not really getting to the root of the problem. Maybe there might be a surgical procedure that needs another evaluation on a natural basis. Whatever the case might be, natural medicine, like I said in the intro, is way more than just doctors and hospitals. It's about getting to the root of problems and really getting you back to health. But it's your decision. You're in command. You're the chief pilot. And I'm just kind of like the control tower. So I keep you guided and keep you steady, but you got to fly the plane, right? There's so many other ways to get information. We have a brand new website. If you get online, it's going to be way different than you experienced before. It's traditionalchinesehealing.com. In the past couple of weeks, we've actually migrated to a clinic that's exclusive healing haven for women of all ages. I made that decision because my clinical experience, my doctorate is in women's health. Dr. Jin, my associate that just came into the practice as a treating physician, her specialty is in women's health. So we decided to make it a women's health clinic, change up our forum, and we love it. It's being flooded with ladies of all ages that are seeking natural medicine for themselves, whether it's digestive problems, whether it's balancing hormones, whether it's thyroid issues, whether it's pain syndromes, autoimmune disease. Oh my gosh, the list just goes on and on of these women that have been suffering for way too long on medications or not, their health has not just been addressed adequately. And I'll tell you, ladies, one thing that keep in mind, especially my moms that I'm talking to, is you have to take care of yourself first. I have so many ladies that say, I'll get the treatment or I'll get taken care of after my husband, my children, whatever, get the care. And I'll tell you, you are the cog wheel that drives the families. And often the women end up having the weakest of the health conditions because they're not addressed first. It's not a priority to them. Everyone else is a priority except their own health. So stop that. Get in and get checked out, and let's see what we can do to get you back to balance. Because if you're healthy, you can take care of families and take care of loved ones yourselves, including caregivers. Other than that, my office phone number, 398-4550, is a great way to get a hold of us or stop by. We're just north of the Roosevelt Bridge here in beautiful Stuart, Florida, and in North Stuart Center. Come and visit us, and we'll give you a tour. We'll sit down. And if you really want more than that and really an in-depth evaluation of what Chinese medicine is and how it potentially can help you, then schedule up. This is a gift. Schedule up on Tuesday evenings starting at 5:30. We have our wellness workshops at that point, and we also have our new patient consultations at that point. If you want to ask a physician, including myself, Dr. Jin, questions, that'd be the time to do it. Get in on Tuesday evening, 5:30 it begins, and it's no obligation. I've taken the financial barrier out of that so that you can get the information that you need to make an educated decision about if this is right for you. You'll know it instantly, and we'll be able to tell you from a medical point of view if you're a good candidate for what we have to offer for you. So call 398-4550. Get in and take advantage of that. You want to know something? I mean, I have a lecture in about a week from now, next weekend at the University Nova Southeastern College of Pharmacy in a continuing education program. And the point of the lecture is an insidious type of pathology that in Chinese medicine, we call it a toxic evil or a pathogenic evil that's crept into the body. And boy, I could not think of a better toxic evil to talk about today than mold, M-O-L-D, mold. And it's so insidious, insidious meaning so quiet, so sneaky, so impeding into the body. And I can tell you a little bit about my own experience, and hopefully you can glean some information so you don't have to go through what I went through for sure. And certainly looking at this from a whole different perspective about my office is really about weirdness too. I mean, I get people that have already seen 6 and 8 gastroenterologists, that have seen neurologists, cardiologists, dermatologists, and it's still, the pattern is still not getting better. Sometimes you have to look in areas that aren't usually evaluated in our current biomedical culture. And that includes things like viral problems or colonized bacterial issues. Thinking of one in huge is like leaky gut syndrome or small intestine bowel overgrowth, bacterial overgrowth, or celiac disease as intestinal problems. But you have to look in places that we're not normally looking, and you have to look for things that we don't normally look for. And in most Western trained arenas, they are not really well versed on taking care of viral and mold and environmental toxicities. In fact, sometimes it gets to the point so much you go to the doctor and you describe these weird patterns like, oh, I'm so sensitive to light and I get these headaches and I have constant bloating or nausea. And they're like, well, stop drinking milk or all, but they really think like it's all in your head. Like all these patterns are really coming from you. You're a hypochondriac, and calm down and let's just give you meds like Ativan or something to calm your system down. These people are suffering, and it's true to order that it is there. You just haven't discovered it, and you really don't know what's going on with this specific pattern, the symptoms that this patient is presenting with. Mold is like that we're going to get into today. I mean, we're talking mold toxicity is probably the number one commonly unrecognized, undiagnosed, and untreated disorder we have going on in the United States today. And that's a pretty bold statement. I would probably have said maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago, Lyme, L-Y-M-E, Lyme disease or Lyme disorder probably would have taken that number one spot. But as we start recognizing, understanding, being able to test adequately for Lyme disorders, and the treatment has become better than it was, not obviously perfect, better than it was, we have better evaluations and better knowledge about this disorder, but not about mold. Mold is one of these things everybody knows not to eat moldy foods. When they see the black Stachybotrys or growing on the window, or they're like, oh, and they try and wipe it up. Or the goal is mold infestation into the systems, into our human bodies is not a good thing. And constant exposure, potentially millions of people every single year exposed to mold. Statistically, 50% of all the homes in the United States have had some sort of water intrusion, water damage, or mold. Now that's crazy, right? But if you think about that down here in Florida, not too crazy. I mean, you combine a wet attic, or a drippy attic, a roof that's leaking, or water intrusion, or flooding into the house. You combine that with darkness, dampness, and humidity, man, you're setting up a great kind of environment for mold in which to grow. And a lot of us don't even know it exists. My son took off, this was years ago, probably, oh my gosh, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, took off to Tallahassee at Florida State University. It was his first experience away from home. He's going to a big school and he wanted his own apartment. He didn't want to live on campus, and we were okay with that. A very, very good kid, very self-conscious. And so we said, okay, no problem. And we found an apartment. He found an apartment for himself. And his apartment was at the last end of the row of a bunch of these small little units. And boy, when it rained, it was like a river that was going downhill right past his back door. And he came home from school one day, and it had just rained, and he walked into his bedroom and his carpet was wet. And he said, I wonder, that's weird. Why would my carpet be so wet unless obviously there was water intrusion? And of course, he said that, yes, Dad, and looking backwards, he said, when it rains, I have a little stream that's coming across the concrete on my patio. And he had sliding glass doors right there. So of course there was water intrusion. Well, he called the landlord, and the landlord actually said, oh, no problem. We'll take care of it right away. Sent out a crew to vacuum up the water. The crew arrived, and my son was astute enough to ask them, so how often you guys come out here and do this kind of stuff? He goes, oh, we're out here at least a couple of times a week at different residences, a couple times a week, vacuuming up water out of these apartments. And the one gentleman that was cleaning the carpet, he goes, yeah, look at, and usually this is what we'll find. He pulled up the corner of the carpeting from the wall, and underneath the carpeting was slam solid black Stachybotrys mold, which is not only toxic, can be devastating to the health. Now, looking back, my son never gets colds, never has allergies. I shouldn't say never gets colds, but very rarely a cold or a flu, never has allergies, postnasal drip, never gets headaches. But what was he complaining about for those 3 weeks that he was living in that apartment? Constant headaches, nasal congestion. He felt like he was tired and fatigued all the time. And he said, Dad, something's not right with my health. Well, you're probably right. Because when I walked into that building, the very first time when we were moving him in, I'm extremely sensitive to mold. And I get this like stinging sensation in my nose. I smell the odor. I was like, Stefan, it's not right in here. You know, there's something going on in here, possibly mold. No, Dad, it's fine. I was like, okay, you know, you're in charge. It's your life. So we walked, but I'm telling you folks, it can be that insidious and never know what's going on. It can be hiding in drywall. It can be hiding behind the baseboards. You know, drywall, we don't even recognize that the drywall, the drywall paper, the backing of drywall is actually made out of pulp or wood pulp. As soon as you get that paper wet, you actually activate mold spores. Mold spores are actually in the paper already. They're not active. They're just kind of hanging out in spore form. Why? Because the environment is too toxic for it to survive or to thrive. So mold is an amazing organism. It goes into kind of a hiding, just like viruses do in the body. They can hide out on nerve roots like shingles, herpes zoster for years and years. But what ends up happening with the paper is once you get that wet, the mold now actually has a nutrient, water, to actually start growing and getting more profuse. So any kind of water damage, even if the drywall got wet and it dried out, the potential now is the drywall, when it was wet, actually the mold was in proliferation. As soon as you start drying stuff out, the mold feels threatened and it will develop into spore form, and you're going to be blowing those spores throughout your entire attic, creating more of a potential problem. This is what happened. I had a leaky roof. The leaky roof ultimately ended up in water intrusion, and water intrusion ended up in mold. And ultimately, I had to go through, like many of you probably in South Florida, a mold mitigation. Unbelievable craziness. Now, before that even happened, I am very astute, obviously, about my health, and I do test some unique labs routinely. And one of the labs that I was testing just happened to be an organic acid test. This is a test that's not mainstream, runs about $300 or so. That's my physician cost. And what it does, it tests for byproducts of metabolism, breakdown products in the body. And that breakdown product comes out in the urine, a simple urine test. And it tested that I had ochratoxin. And ochratoxin comes either from the environment, from a moldy environment, or from food. And I know I don't eat moldy food. I'm very, very careful about that. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, then there must be something in the environment in which I'm in. I checked the office. The office is absolutely clean. And so I go up into my attic, which I haven't been in quite a while, and find that I had a leak. I had a drip. And sure enough, on the top of on the bottom side of the plywood, there had been mold that had already started growing. And worse than that, it had started dripping onto the drywall. So immediately I called what they call a kind of an engineer in the mold industry. an industrial hygienist, a certified industrial hygienist. Now, be very careful, folks. There is so many scamming people that'll scam you, and this is such a huge lucrative business, especially in South Florida. You have to be careful that you get people that are credentialed and certified in doing this kind of work. It is definitely needed, definitely necessary, but like I said, make sure they're certified. And this is not a fly-by-night organization that's just going to bill a lot of insurance and cause a lot of problems for you. So you have to have, unfortunately today, you have to be your own medical advocate, because no one's going to be your advocate. Our Western docs, some of them, even Chinese medical docs, we've depended on them. Well, we've sought their advice and we trust them. And sometimes it frustrates us because we still have the same conditions. And why aren't I getting better? Why doesn't my physician know what's going on with me? There's a huge gap in knowledge with mold. Little research is being done right now with mold. It's getting better. We're starting to understand it better. But unless you're a functional medicine, unless you're seeing a functional medicine physician, what we don't know really outweighs what we know, which is kind of crazy. But what we do know has been helpful in treatments. And that's a good thing. Thanks, Tracy, for joining us on Facebook.com/Dr. Shipe, if you want to get online too. So patients have to be their own advocates because they can't depend on doctors to make these diagnoses anymore. And it's not the fact that that we really aren't well skilled as being physicians. It's just for the fact we're not used to it. Well, what had happened, where did this all start also, is when I went back to my air conditioning system, what had happened is when the house was originally built, they didn't seal the box, the air conditioner box, the intake, that all that air comes into and then gets passed through the air conditioner. So instead of pulling the majority of the air out of the house to put through the air conditioner, it was pulling the majority of the air out of my warm, moist attic and sending it through the air conditioner. Whenever you put moisture and humidity and heat together in an air conditioning system and cool that air very, very quickly, you create condensation. Condensation is a great environment for mold to grow, and it was loaded in my AC systems. So ultimately, the cost to me, an entire duct system removal, an entire removal of my air conditioning, my HVAC systems. It was intense. I went back and mediated every single little inch of the property. And so now I feel good. I feel calm about this procedure, but I'm telling you folks, under carpeting even, you have to look in behind baseboards, every little area it can hide out to, and get it tested. There's some very, very unique tests that can be done to see what type, and the quantitative means how much of it is currently in your environment, which you live. Because the very first goal, right? Wouldn't the very first goal not be to just consider, oh, let's just get the mold out of the system? We're going to talk about that after we take a break here. But the first goal is not only get it out of the system, but literally, how do I get it out of my environment? Because you don't want to constantly be, if you get it out and you're constantly exposed to the mold back, then you're having to treat this all over again. So we're going to look at this from a Western point of view and from a traditional Chinese point of view about natural treatments today on how to mitigate mold and get our lives better, heal better before this gets the best of us. I'm Dr. Stuart Shipe. Listen, call Cliff 340-1590 here on A Better Way to Health. We'll be right back after this short announcement and take your questions. Dr. Stuart Shipe.
This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
God bless you. Sounds like you're getting a cold. You should let my dad, Dr. Stuart Shipe, check you using Oriental medicine so it doesn't get worse. It could be nothing, but it could be the start of something bad.
Doesn't your dad do acupuncture?
Yes, but acupuncture physicians also use natural, safe Chinese herbs, Tuina massage, nutrition, and exercise, like Qigong for healing as well. My sisters and I never receive antibiotics or vaccines for colds, flus, or any other infections at our house.
I thought acupuncture was just for pain.
Actually, traditional Chinese medicine is the most widely used and accepted medicine in the world.
Like my dad wanting to lose weight and my mom always being tired and hot.
Yes. Why don't you call Dr. Stuart Shipe at 398-4550?
How much does it cost?
The consultation and evaluation are absolutely free. You've got nothing to lose. He'll tell you if he doesn't feel he can help you. It's worth the opportunity if you can. You'll feel great. Don't wait. Make your appointment now at 398-4550.
Visit the office in North Stewart or the website, traditionalchinesehealing.com.
This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
All right, we're right back to A Better Way to Health. Thanks, Cliff, for bringing us back. And keep him busy, 340-1590. The phone lines will ring. He'll pick up the phone. He'll get the question to us, or you can present it live online and we'll get you the answer. I hope today's show, like every single show, touches at least someone to improve their health from a natural point of view, because that is my goal. But I can't help you if I don't know what's going on with you. So many people have the same type of problems, and they keep on having to deal with it because they want to. Stop it. Make that decision that I want an end to this. I want to figure out the why. Why is my body not doing what it's supposed to do, which is actually to heal, because something's in the way. Today, we're talking about what's in the way is mold. Listen, statistically, 75% of us, when we come in contact with molds, mold in and of itself is really not potentially toxic where it's going to kill you immediately, but it usually preys on opportunistic individuals. 75% of us have the enzymes. Enzymes are things in our body, chemicals that can actually break stuff down so we can get rid of it. Have the enzymes to break down mold. The scary part is 25% of us don't have the enzymes. We have a genetic kind of hiccup that we can't make the enzymes that can actually get rid of the mold. So once mold comes in, it stays. Listen to me carefully. Mold is not an infection. It's an infestation. It's like bad neighbors moving into your house. You don't want them there. They're there for a long period of time, and eventually they may even kick you out of your house or make you sick enough that you have to leave. So why do we need to test for what we call mycotoxicosis? Well, that's a big fancy word, but what it means is that mold generates toxins. Mold is very territorial, and it likes kind of sniffing out its turf. And a mold will develop spores in order to spread out into this turf so that other mold spores know what's going on in its environment. They kind of are territorial. So when mold starts throwing toxins off, it's usually not against humans per se. It's against other molds because it wants to make sure that its territory is secure and its survival rate is ensured. But when it hits our body systems, man, they throw off toxins just as much. Especially if we try and pull them out, start tugging on them, start killing them, they are not happy, and they will actually start throwing endotoxins. It's one of these things where just by killing it is not enough. It doesn't go out without a fight. When it dies, it can release, just like candida or other types of pathogenic yeast, release a lot of toxins into the environment. So we call them mycotoxins if it's from mold. We call them endotoxins if it comes from a bacterial infection or an infestation, most of the time infestations. And toxicity is generated from when they die. So that's the very first thing. We have to test for it, because a lot of these organic products, for the breakdown products of mold, which are these organic acids, can be seen in the urine and tested for the urine. So it's really not that difficult, the testing. In fact, we've come a long way in mycotoxin testing, but it's really an art in how to create a formula or a treatment strategy for getting rid of these. You know, mold or illness occurs in a person that doesn't have these antibodies to these molds. And ultimately, they accumulate very, very high levels of these dangerous toxins. And when these toxins can get to a certain level, the patient starts throwing off symptoms. And we're going to get to the symptoms here in a second, but man, these are not common. These are things like your doctor scratching his head, like I told you, and saying, this is a hypochondriac. And mold has a lot of friends, indoor friends. When it comes in the door into the house, it's very, very rare that mold comes in alone. It usually is harbored by a lot of other live and dead microorganisms. You got bacteria, you got fragments of dead organisms, you ultimately have allergens, you got volatile organic compounds. Mold toxicity is so bad, it's actually listed as a VOC itself, a volatile organic compound. You're like, what is a VOC? Well, it's an environmental toxin. Usually when we get, I'll tell you what a VOC is. You want to know a VOC? Go to the gas pump and put your gas pump nozzle in your car and stick your nose down there by the gas pump. No, don't do that. But if you did, you would be experiencing tremendous VOCs, volatile organic compounds. Toluene, benzene, gasoline, all have these noxious chemicals that really wear out our antioxidant systems in the body and cause a lot of problems. Mold toxins are VOCs as well. These are volatile organic compounds that are being released as well. So mold will tax our immune system. In Chinese medicine, it'll cause a Wei Qi deficiency. Wei means defensive armor. It means it can weaken your immune system. And Qi deficiencies are not good in Chinese medicine. Fatigue and tiredness, gaining weight, bloating, abdominal distension, foggy headedness, clouding of the mind, can't sleep at night. So many, just generalized lethargy. You just know, get up and go. It got up and left long time ago. These damp materials even contribute more problems. So when the water intrusion comes in, the mold grows, old bacteria, you got allergens, you got dust, all this other craziness stuff goes. Now you've got possibly viral growths, you've got protozoa, which are nasty one-cell organisms that can invade the body and stay there for a long period of time. You got rodents, you got cockroaches, you've got release of chemicals, formaldehyde, especially if you're coming into a new building that has off-gassing still from the floors, from the solvents in the furniture or in the draperies or in the blinds. All of that builds into something called sick building syndrome, or SBS. SBS is quite common in a lot of buildings. This building is sick. You guys hear about it all the time. A school, where you find out in your workplace or your school that there was mold, or there's high levels, toxic levels of mold, and you've been wondering why. Man, I never had postnasal drip, or I never had headaches, or I never had allergens, and now I do. And what's the deal with that? We get immunological problems. So immunological means the immune system becomes compromised. And by the way, if you've had mold damage before, if you've gone through this process, I'd love to hear you. 340-1590 here on the studio at WPSL. We'll get you on the line and get you out an answer. So suppression of the immune system, overstimulation of the immune system occurs with mold. And also autoimmunity. This is the worst of the cases. I had a young child as a patient, still do actually, that came in. A number of children now I've had in the past year that have come in with autism spectrum-like disorders, or ADD, ADHD-like disorders that have been diagnosed down that road. And man, you just look in a different direction. And I was like, is this common for your child? And they're like, no. He came into the bedroom one morning. He was like 3 or 4 years old, stood by the side of the bed at 3 o'clock in the morning and screamed his bloody head off. And I was like, what? And they're like, yep, it just happened just like that. And ever since that, the kid went into remission, didn't talk, buried his head, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorders. Now, come on, guys, you kind of start thinking about that. That usually is so weird and so uncommon. You're going to run this child through all the neurological tests that are common. Yeah, and they did nothing. Everything was beautiful until we ran an organic acid test and found mold. So it was so bad. The levels in him were so bad. They were off the Richter scale. And then other toxins associated with that, due to not only maybe the mycotoxin, the mold, but like I said, off-gassing in these VOCs, the kid had high levels of environmental toxins, ended up moving out of the house, starting treatment in a new home. And the dad comes home from working in the old home, and just enough of that toxin on his tissue was able to set that child off right back into the same old pattern. So just confirmed what we thought was always the etiology or the reason that the child had these problems. Now, child is talking, minimal OCD problems, conversing, playing like a child normally would. And why? Because we were looking for things in a different spot than normal. And this is what ends up happening. We have toxic problems can develop even in children, neurotoxicity, mental problems like this, like ADD, ADHD, obsessive compulsive disorder from mycotoxins. We can have reproductive damage. not even knowing in young women that they're harboring an infestation of mold or viral or bacterial toxins in their systems that are just wearing them out and depleting them. And we haven't even really talked about Lyme. That's a whole other subject in of itself. But another, like I said at the beginning of the show, another insidious problem that just robs our energy and robs our health from us. Studies show, listen to this, studies show that mycotoxins or mold toxins are more toxic to human beings than pesticides. And that we should have front page on USA Today or on the Times, that we should really be mitigating our homes and looking at our environments in which we live in every day, because we're not even close to knowing what's going on with these patterns or with these type of problems. So what about genetics? Can you be genetically predisposed? And hey, Elaine, thank you for joining the show today. And Alice, thank you for tuning in to Facebook today to watch the show. Can you be predisposed to mold? Of course you can be genetically. Like I said, 25% of us can't make the antibodies. We don't have the enzymes to be able to get this pattern under control. So we end up suffering and suffering and suffering because no one's finding out the reason why I'm so tired, why I have headaches, why I have fatigue, why I have joint pain, on and on. So things like just for water damage, I'm talking about, for water damage building and mold toxicity, things like memory problems, things like spaciness in the head, loss of focus, excessive fatigue, coughing, slurred speech, making sure the weak voice, watery eyes, allergy-like symptoms that really just doesn't seem to go away, lightheadedness or dizziness, weakness, headaches, things like throat discomfort or sinus discomfort routinely, coordination problems, not being coordinated, maybe nasal symptoms, bloating, visual changes, and rashes. These are just a short listing of problems. Now, what if you were a physician and you had a patient come in and say, doctor, I've got this rash going on, I get this headache, and I have this postnasal drip that's chronic, and I have this, and I have that, my watery eyes, and my voice is kind of weak, and the doctor is going, hypochondriac, right? I mean, wouldn't that be the first thought? Well, when I have patients come in with these multiple symptoms, I'm not looking at the symptom directly. What I'm looking at is, what is this system telling me? It's really whacked out of balance. There's a lot of things going on. We try and focus it on the root of that. And I am probably the premier in the area expert at weirdness that comes in. Neurotoxicity. 100 individuals, listen to this, a study of 100 individuals exposed to mold in homes found multiple neurological deficits in 70% and abnormalities in T and B cells in over 80% of patients. So what does that mean? It's affected the immune system tremendously. Helper T cells, suppressor T cells, B cells are your main fortresses of prevention for cancer and for infectious disease in the body. And it said we found abnormalities in 80% of these 100 subjects. So is it a possibility, you listening to me right now, that you have gliotoxins or mycotoxins or ochratoxins flooding your body? Quite possible, because no one's ever evaluated for them before. And if someone has evaluated for them before, here's a tricky little secret that you say, oh, it'll just pop up on a lab. Not all the time. And I will tell you that if you've treated this long enough as I've had, then what you'll find is you'll get little scant amounts of penicillinase or aspergillus or these type of mold, differentiated mold. And you're like, well, it's not that bad, but the patient is actually suffering. And once you try and bind these toxins and pull them from the tissue, you can do that with things like chlorella and chlorophyllin, which is like a chlorophyll product. You can do it with probiotics, specialized probiotics. When you start pulling these things, oh my gosh, the patient goes berserk. They get worse. They're like, oh my gosh, Dr. Shipe, you're killing me. You know, I thought it was bad. I'm going to tough it out. No, the worst possible thing with mold mycotoxins is to tough it out. Do not have that patient. Do not let them have symptoms. You just have to go really, really slow and use really, really low doses to start. Because as you start pulling them from the tissue, they're so ingrained into the tissue and it's so profuse. It's kind of like taking a magnet with iron fillings. It's not this adsorbent where it like sticks like bubble gum or glue. It's kind of more of a weak adhesion. when you start pulling mycotoxins out. So when you're pulling these toxins out, you're kind of leaving a lot back in the bloodstream. And when you start pulling toxins from the tissue back into the bloodstream, not very, very pleasant symptoms. A patient will actually come hunting with a shotgun at you because they feel terrible. So it's just a whole process, and it is a process, and it is definitely not understood in the biomedical world. But mycotoxicosis can be life-threatening. Exposure to mycotoxins in clinical studies may result in permanent pathological, immunological, psychological, and neurological damages. Dangerous molds have now been limited to a number of different diseases that are prevalent today. Listen to this: learning disabilities, gastrointestinal disturbances, which is stomach problems, intestinal problems, reflux, gastroesophageal reflux disease, heart problems, cancer, multiple sclerosis, fibromyalgia, and several autoimmune diseases, all from mold and all from not knowing the symptoms of these mycotoxin exposures, including endocrine system. And I didn't even hit that. What's the endocrine system? Things like the pancreas secreting insulin, so insulin regulation problems. The thyroid secreting thyroid hormones, thyroid problems can affect tremors, spikes in blood pressure. I mean, the list, it's huge. When you look up symptoms of mycotoxins, you Google that, get ready to sit down and be awed. 3 or 4 pages of symptoms relating to mycotoxin exposure. And the greatest of all the pretenders is Stachybotrys, black mold. And of course, we've all heard about it. It's termed toxic black mold as its second name, can occur anywhere in the country, even in cold climates, even sub-zero temperatures, folks. I'm telling you, these mycotoxins are not like snowbirds that they can't stand the cold. They literally can deal very, very well in extreme environments. How do they do that? They go into spore form and they stay hidden until the environment becomes conducive that they can come out. Usually bacteria grow side by side with mold, and you can usually tell Stachybotrys. You can also tell other mold. Why? Because they have an unpleasant odor that can be mistaken for a lot of things. And you come home and you're like, what's that odor in the house? Oh, maybe I didn't take out the garbage or whatever. But the key is people make excuses for something that's right in front of their nose and they don't even know what's going on. So sarcoidosis, aspergillus or aspergillosis, penicillinase, these are all nasty species. I had just bought grapes and I love grapes. You know, they have such a great water content. They nourish the body. They cool the body as we're coming into the summer seasons here. And I picked it up from an outdoor food market. And I was picking these grapes and I noticed there was a little white portion on one of the grapes. Oh my gosh. Do you recognize that we've got a moist environment in grapes, right? Grapes are one of, among many foods, but things like wheat and rye and sorghum, barley, peanuts are notorious for aflatoxins. I just tell my patients, just shy away, just don't eat peanuts anymore. Eat something, almonds or walnuts or macadamia nuts, so much healthier for the body than peanuts. Not that we have Florida peanuts, boiled peanuts, and probably okay at that stage, but peanuts usually roasted, and if they come in exposure, especially shelled peanuts come in exposure to water, we get mold growing inside the shell casings of peanuts. And you can't get rid of the mold. You're like, okay, I'll just eat peanut butter. You can't, because the mold goes into a spore form, is very heat tolerant, just like I said, cold tolerant. It's also heat tolerant, can withstand really high temperatures. You can't bake out the mold. Your oven only goes to 500 degrees, and the mold will transfer in that cooking process right into the peanut butter. I know for you peanut fans, that probably isn't good news. Things like cottonseed oil. And you're like, it's an oil. How can mold be in my oil? Because it was originally on the cotton. And then the cotton was milled and pressed and prepped and ultimately flows right into the oils. Things like sugar from sugarcane or sugar beets can be loaded in mold aflatoxins. And hard cheese, especially Gouda cheese, especially blue cheese. Like blue cheese is like, why would you knowingly stick mold into the system? And you're like, oh, it doesn't hurt anybody. It's mold. And 25% of us can't get rid of it. So is that going to develop toxins? Well, I think that the toxin exposure, many of us can handle unbelievable toxic loads. But the problem with a lot of us, it becomes a bioburden. It's not just mold. We have a lack of sleep. Our nutritional status isn't that great potentially. So many other factors are wearing down our immune system. And then relatively non-toxic mold that's really shouldn't be toxic to humans, all of a sudden becomes pretty toxic to our systems because our immune system is beat up. And then it becomes an opportunistic infection. Thanks, Ada and Pat, for tuning into Facebook as well. So how do you have to intervene? The assessment of this, when I have a patient that I think potentially has mold exposure or a mold infestation, I do a very thorough history and physical. You have to have a history on this individual. Did they have experience to mold? I've got you want to go online. My website is traditionalchinesehealing.com. There's a toxicity questionnaire, should be, hopefully they got that corrected. There's a toxicity questionnaire on my site. And that's an easy one. It's just 2-page, and you can really glean how exposed are you to toxic imbalances. And I have like a 10-page questionnaire that'll get into the nitty gritty, like how far from a major highway are you from your exposure to these volatile organic compounds and certainly particulate matter from diesel. I mean, it's just unbelievable the amount of burden that we carry. Thank goodness there's something we can do about it, right? We're going to take a short break, but when we get back, I'm going to tell you what is the intervention and how can you do it naturally? Because once we make that diagnosis and get that assessment down for you, then we find measures to try and remediate this mold, not only in your home, but in your body as well. So we'll be right back on A Better Way to Health. I'm Dr. Stuart Shipe. 340-1590 is our phone number. I expect to hear from you. If you have questions, let me hear your story. We'll be right back.
Achoo!
God bless you. Sounds like you're getting a cold. You should let my dad, Dr. Stuart Shipe, check you using Oriental medicine so it doesn't get worse. It could be nothing, but it could be the start of something bad.
Doesn't your dad do acupuncture?
Yes, but acupuncture physicians also use natural, safe Chinese herbs, Tuina massage, nutrition, and exercise, like Qigong for healing as well. My sisters and I never receive antibiotics or vaccines for colds, flus, or any other infections at our house.
I thought acupuncture was just for pain.
Actually, traditional Chinese medicine is the most widely used and accepted medicine in the world.
Like my dad wanting to lose weight and my mom always being tired and hot.
Yes, why don't you call Dr. Stuart Shipe at 398-4550?
How much does it cost?
The consultation and evaluation are absolutely free. You've got nothing to lose. He'll tell you if he doesn't feel he can help you. It's worth the opportunity if you can. You'll feel great. Don't wait. Make your appointment now at 398-4550.
Visit the office in North Stewart or the website, traditionalchinesehealing.com.
This is WPSL Port St. Lucie.
Hey, we're right back to A Better Way Health. Thanks, guys, for joining me on Facebook today. Tracy, Elaine, Alice, Ada, Pat, thanks a lot for tuning in. And all you in radio land listening to, I'm glad you're here. I hopefully will give you some information or some data to improve your life today and your health. I would assume that since the statistics are 50% of homes in the US have some sort of water intrusion or have had water damage, it's pretty likely that the majority of people living in the US probably have some after effects. At least 25% of us in those homes can't get rid of the mold and actually have problems they don't even know about that can muster some really bizarre side effects, like having postnasal drip for the last 20 years and never knowing that it was mold infestation going on with you. If you'd like to get rid of that and get to the root of a lot of those problems, then you got to check. You have to find out how to diagnose this and evaluate it. Now, there are certified industrial hygienists that will come out to your home that literally will set up some very unique apparatuses that actually pull an airstream across a plate and trap mold spores and can give you actually what type of mold potentially is lurking around the corner underneath your baseboards and your ceiling and so forth, and then give you a remediation report. And I'll be happy to look at that as well. making sure that we have the right treatment for the right type of toxins. Now that we got the test done, very first thing I said in intervention, in remediating it inside the body, is exposure. That's why I'm so avid. When I see a mold infestation in an individual, you have to look at the environment. You have to take care of the environment. And that sometimes is hard, folks, because it could be you have to move. If it's a real problem and it's affecting your health to that extent, you have to find a different house or a different residence in order to move from. And you have to fix the cause. Just drying out your drywall is not helpful. I know that's what they do. They try and stabilize this, but ultimately the best way is to remove the mold, the drywall, when it's still wet. When you dry it out, you threaten that mold. It goes into spore form and just spreads like wildfire throughout your whole house. Studies indicate that building remediation actually decreased asthma-related symptoms and respiratory infection in adults and kids. So allergies, chronic allergies, should be investigated from that. So how do we initially deal with it? First of all, I look at the immune status of the individual. From a Chinese point of view, from Chinese medicine, we check the pulse, look at the tongue. If we see qi deficiencies, if we see the tongue thick, white coating, teeth marks, fatigue and tiredness, of course, qi deficiency, and we have to boost the qi first and get that back, get the person's strength back, their immune strength. If it's Western medicine, then we have to start thinking about things like, okay, how toxic are they? And remember I told you the test could be minimal? It could be minimal because we haven't pulled the toxins out. We haven't stirred up the kettle. But what I've found is that when you start pulling and you can test again, they're off the chart. And what we thought that was a minimal exposure now looks like it was a major exposure. And usually you go by the symptoms of the patient and you go slow. Some patients are more tolerant. It's certainly individualized. If I could say one word to both the patients and the practitioners that are listening to me, and you're dealing with mold, you have to, the word is individualized. It's not one treatment seeks all. It's not. And you're going to have some people that are more resilient, have stronger immune systems, just like COVID. Some people with the virus literally succumb to that and are immunocompromised and really, really suffer the consequences. Some people have stronger immune systems and don't even get a sniffle or a fever from that. So the takeaway points, the origin of mycotoxins, they're latent. They really brood well with bacteria, with yeast. They have specific spore producing fungi that hit out, and you can touch them and get them through contact in the skin. You can breathe them or you can eat them. They can get into the body in many different venues. So the goal is to try and start mobilizing them. How do you mobilize them? You use natural products that literally will start pulling them from the tissues. I mentioned just a couple: chlorophyllin, chlorella, blue-green algae. These are amazing. Some of the types of specialized probiotics are very, very helpful for doing that. And once you get done starting to mobilize them, you have to clear them. And what I mean by clearing them is there's an organ system in the body, very, very important to support. It's called the liver and the gallbladder. The liver and the gallbladder take out fragments of antibody antigen complexes, like these immune complexes, taken out in the liver. The body also implants a lot of those toxins, even these volatile organic compounds, through the liver into the bile. Once they're in the bile, the gallbladder puts that bile out into the intestinal system. Unless you're able to bind and grab, fiber does an okay job, but nowhere near some of the other great binders we have, both as drugs and as natural products, because bile is reabsorbed. So the problem there is someone gave you a liver detox or a mold detox, but they never told you that if the bile is being reabsorbed, you're just recycling it over and over and over, these toxins. You have to bind them and actually pull them out of the system through the bowel. That's the first stage. Now, there's some great binders. We have Wellcol, we've got cholestyramine resins, we've got some great products, but the problem is you actually have one other complication, is some of these products are loaded with sugar, FD&C red, number 3, yellow. Drugs sometimes have excipients, means that things that aren't supposed to be effective in order to make the capsule or make the powder taste better, You don't want to use that stuff. So now we have to go to a compounded pharmacy. And I don't have prescriptive privileges, but I find that natural medicine works very, very effectively, just as Western medicine does. Instead of using really toxic, what I consider liver toxic antifungal medications like itraconazole or Sporanox, some of these drugs, you can do that. You can support the liver very effectively. You can pull toxins very, very effectively. Bentonite clay, charcoal, activated charcoal, da huang, some of these herbs are really, really amazing at clearing toxins and bringing balance back to the whole system. It's kind of complicated, yes, and you have to go slow. You have to individualize the therapy, and you have to see someone that knows what's going on, because most patients get fearful. As soon as you start throwing toxins and they start feeling worse, they're going to stop therapy immediately. And they'll say, Dr. Shipe, I'm so sensitive, I can't take anything. I agree you're sensitive, but we have to start with 1/8 of a tablet, or maybe 1/4 of a tablet, or 1/8 of a teaspoonful. You have to start very, very gently. And it's persistence, folks. You're not going to get rid of this stuff in just a day or a week. So you have to be in the game to feel better. And I'm telling you, you can feel so much better if you just find out the cause of the problem. I've enjoyed the show today, at least getting the information to you. I've hoped you'd enjoy it as well. I hope it really puts in the back of your mind to look for craziness when the doctors are telling you you're crazy and you know you're not crazy, that you have to look in different areas. You have to explore a medicine like traditional Chinese medicine that looks at constitutional diagnosis. And all of this weirdness that's going on in your body, you're not weird. It's just you are inflicted today. You've been infested, if that's a word, infested with something that's very insidious. And there's great treatments. Give me a call, 398-4550. Don't let the symptoms continue, folks. Find out what's going on. These are great diagnostic tests we have also in Western medicine, very high tech, that can root out problems, and we can resolve them at that point. Don't let them go. And if I can't help you, if I don't think I can help you, I'll certainly refer you down the road. But it's a great opportunity. Come in Tuesday evening, 5 p.m. and get the 5:30, excuse me, and get the consultation, evaluation, the wellness workshop, and hopefully get yourself on the way to a better way to health as well. Start your healing journey and get rid of the symptoms. It all starts today, 398-4550. May the Chi be with you. May the dear Lord bless you with abundant health and rip those toxins away from us once we get involved in therapy for you. Only he can do all the great healing. So until next week, SciGN, folks, it's been a great experience. 398-4550. SciGN, Dr. Shipe, signing out.
A better way to health comes your way multimedia on the radio, on Facebook, and on YouTube in our archives. Tune in every Thursday morning at the 11 o'clock hour for a better way to health with Dr. Shipe. This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast on Google Home, Alexa, and the TuneIn app on your smartphone.